Nearly $2 billion is being poured into an airport that already ranks #1 in North America, but the news are not talking about it. So in this video, I'm breaking down the massive changes coming to the Minneapolis airport and which suburbs around the airport you need to keep your eye on. Most airports can't even get the basics right, but MSP is over here winning national awards for them. And that's a big reason this airport keeps landing at the top of Jadde Power's North America Airport Satisfaction Study. 3 of the last 4 years at #1, including the second straight year right now. It's clean, it's spacious, it flows really well, and there are tons of great restaurants inside. Delta runs a super tight operation here because Minneapolis is its second largest hub in the entire country, accounting for roughly 70% of the passengers moving through this airport. If you want a really specific example of how seriously they take the details here, MSP actually won a national award for having the best restrooms of any airport in the country. I know that sounds random, right? But airports are usually terrible at the basics. So winning something like that is proof that this place pays attention to everything. My honest take is that MSP is genuinely one of the few airports I actually enjoy flying out of, and that's pretty rare. And what's wild is later on, I'm gonna show you the plans for nearly $2 billion in upgrades being built on top of an airport that's already this good. But let me tell you something first. Minnesota is growing, travel demand is growing, and the people running this airport are confident enough in where this region is headed that they're making a massive long-term bet on it. You don't invest at this kind of scale if you don't believe Minneapolis is gonna keep becoming an even bigger hub that connects people all over the country and all over the world. So let's get into the actual scope of this thing, because once you see how much money is being spent here, it starts to hit just how massive these changes really are. When an airline is willing to put tens of millions of dollars into a renovating airport they don't even own, that's a pretty big signal. And that's exactly what Delta did here. They put $60 million of their own money into one of the major renovation phases at MSP. And that was paired with another $182.5 million from the MAC in that same project alone. And again, that's just one piece of the full $1.9 billion capital improvement program that MAC has running through 2028. So this isn't some idea sitting in a file somewhere since construction is already happening. Money is already moving and the airport already looks different from what it did just a couple of years ago. Later on, I'll show you exactly which neighborhoods sit close to all of this investment and why the people who figured it out early are already ahead. Stay with me. Now together, these projects touch basically every part of the airport. Terminal 1, Terminal 2, Concourse G, airfield infrastructure, and land side capacity, so we're really not talking about one isolated project here. This is a broad overhaul of the whole airport. And once you break down what's already finished, what's underway right now, and what's coming next, that's when you really start to see how much is already changing at the MSP airport. By the way, if you're thinking about buying in the Twin Cities and want to understand how an airport transformation like this actually affects home values in the suburbs around it, I work with buyers across the metro every single day and can give you a real breakdown of what's available right now. My contact information is in the description below. Now, let's keep going. If you've flown out of MSP in the last few months and thought, this feels different, you're not imagining it. 2 major Terminal 1 programs both wrapped up in 2025, and together they changed a lot about what it feels like to move through this airport. The first one is the Operational Improvements Program. This was a $600 million decade-long project focused on everything before security. They expanded the terminal footprint 16 feet toward the roadway, consolidated security into 2 larger checkpoints, upgraded baggage claim with bigger carousels, and modernized a lot of the building systems throughout. The whole pre-security area is brighter, cleaner, and a lot less congested than it used to be. And then layered on top of that, you've got the Airport Modernization Program, or the AMP, which was a $242 million joint project between the MAC and Delta that wrapped up in December 2025. This one covered everything after security. 6 of the 7 concourses got a unified redesign with new floorings, updated wall finishes, modern ceiling paints, better LED lighting, and all 75 Delta gate areas got new seating with power outlets at most seats, dynamic flight displays at every gate, and updated branding all across the board. So if you've flown through MSP recently and thought it looked sharper, more modern, and just more pulled together, that's exactly why. Now for what's actively underway, and this is where it gets really interesting, Concourse G is in the middle of a $305 million expansion that's scheduled to finish in 2028. They're adding 157,000 square feet of new space, widening the central corridor, and increasing gate seating by 52%, which is a huge jump. And one of the greater details here is that international arrival gates are going from 10 to 13. And that's a pretty big deal if you travel a lot internationally, or if you work in a business where these global connections actually matter. Beyond just the added space, the design details are honestly really solid too. More restrooms, more concessions, dedicated art display areas, and a sensory space built specifically for travelers with sensory sensitivities in partnership with Fraser, which is a local organization. And again, this whole expansion is also going for LEED Gold certification. So they're building it with sustainable materials and water reclamation systems throughout. Terminal 2 is getting a lot of work too through the north expansion, adding 168,000 square feet of space, 2 new gates, more concessions, new restrooms, and an added traffic lane out front to help with the curbside congestion that can make drop-off and pickup kind of annoying. So when you step back and look at it, you've got projects that finished in 2025, major construction happening right now, and more changes rolling out all the way through 2028, basically touching every part of the airport experience from the curb to the gate. And once you see how much has already been delivered and how much is still in motion, the economic impact behind all of this starts to make a lot more sense. A 2024 economic impact study found that MSP produces about $21.3 billion in annual economic output and supports more than 93,000 jobs across the region. So this is a whole lot more than just a place people catch flights, because it turned into one of the biggest economic engines in the entire state. And when you pair that with the airport's plan to handle about 50% more passengers by 2040, it sends a very clear message that Minneapolis is only becoming more important for businesses, hiring, and global travel, which is exactly the kind of thing that helps a region stay competitive long term. Even during construction, that impact is already showing up, with hundreds of millions of dollars in additional economic output being generated while these projects are still being built. And when you zoom out, this airport investment is really just one piece of a much bigger shift happening across the Twin Cities right now. You've got the Boston Scientific expansion in Maple Grove, the Boulevard development in Plymouth, the Green Line extension, and now nearly $2 billion going into MSP. That's a lot of major investment, all pointing toward the Twin Cities becoming an even bigger economic hub over the next couple of decades. And one area that stands to benefit more than most is the South Metro, especially the suburbs closest to the airport. That's where this starts to matter a lot more if you're thinking about where to live. A senior Delta executive and a pro football player ended up living right next door to each other in the same Minneapolis suburb, and neither one of them picked that location by accident. That suburb is Mendota Heights, and the reason both landed there comes down to one thing: the airport. I have a really close friend whose family was deeply involved with Delta at a very high senior level. His dad was actually being groomed to run the entire company before he ended up retiring. And Mendota Heights is where they chose to plant roots. And when someone at that level inside Delta is choosing a suburb, they know the airport better than anyone. They picked Mendota Heights because for most parts of the neighborhood, you can get to MSP in about 10 to 15 minutes, which is honestly pretty rare for a metro this size. And pro athletes think about it the same way. When you're on a professional team flying somewhere almost every other week, that drive to the airport is part of the job. My friend's dad actually had a pro football player living right next door. So you've got this interesting mix of senior airline executives, aviation professionals, and pro athletes all ending up in the same suburb for the exact same practical reason. Beyond the airport access, Mendota Heights is also just a really nice place to live. Well-kept homes, bigger lots, a lot of privacy, and it sits almost perfectly between downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul. So you've got easy access to both. Houses here typically range around the low to mid 400s to mid 500s. So it definitely skews a little more premium than some of the other South Metro options, but for a lot of buyers, the location and overall feel really justify that. It tends to fly under the radar compared to some of the big name western suburbs, but the people who discover it usually put it very high on their list. Inver Grove Heights sits right in the same South Metro zone. You've got well-kept homes, bigger lots, and a lot of newer construction. with a similar suburban feel as Mendota Heights, but without the same name recognition. Houses here typically range around the mid 300s, so the value can look really strong if you want that South Metro location without spending quite as much. So the fundamentals are really strong and the prices are usually a little more approachable. Burnsville is another one worth paying attention to. I actually have a friend who's a flight attendant for Delta and lives there, and it makes total sense once you think about it. You've got well-kept homes, larger lots, some newer construction, and you're still really close to the airport just without the Mendota Heights price tag. It's a strong quality of life suburb with a really manageable commute to MSP. And then you got Eagan, which rounds out this group really well. It has a strong commercial base, excellent airport access, and a lot of people who work in aviation or travel frequently already know it well. Houses here typically range around the low 400s, so it usually lands right in the middle ground where you're getting a strong location, solid amenities, and really convenient access to MSP. It just doesn't come up in the typical suburban conversation as much because it doesn't have the same buzz as some of the western suburbs, but the fundamentals there are super solid. MSP was already the best airport in North America, and nearly $2 billion is making sure it stays that way. At the same time, the suburbs around it are quietly becoming some of the most strategic places to buy in the entire metro. So if you're thinking about buying near the airport or want to know which South Metro suburbs make the most sense for your situation, email me today and I'll give you a real breakdown of what's available right now. This is one of those markets where timing actually matters. And if you want to see the full picture of how Minneapolis is changing right now, check out the video I've linked right here. Thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you guys in the next one.